Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, I'm Tamika Brown-Nagan, the Dean of the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study. We welcome you to our annual Julia S. Phelps Lecture in the Arts and the Humanities. Julia Phelps was a Radcliffe College alumna and a beloved instructor in Harvard's German department, the Extension School, and here at Radcliffe. Upon Julia's retirement, her friends, family, and colleagues established the Phelps Lecture series in her honor. I'm delighted to see Julia's daughter, Susan Napier, and her son-in-law, Stephen Coit, in the audience today. Thank you both for joining us. Our Phelps Lecturer this afternoon is the incomparable Ayodele Cassell. Yes. The Francis B. Cashion Fellow here at Radcliffe. Ayodele is a multi-talented artist. She is an accomplished tap dancer, choreographer, and actor. At the Institute, she's been hard at work on a full-length theatrical piece titled Diary of a Tap Dancer, which we'll hear more about this afternoon. Tap dance, like jazz, is a uniquely American art form. It is a fusion of European clogging and African dance, nearly 300 years in the making. And this history is a part of tap dance's appeal to hoofers and audiences alike. But history, as ever, is complicated. Tap is also tied to legacies of racial exploitation and oppression. It arose out of cultural exchange between enslaved Africans and Irish indentured servants. And in the 19th and early 20th centuries, it was a mainstay of minstrel shows in which white tappers often performed in blackface. The history of tap dance also intersects with gender in complex ways. Women were barred from 20th century hoofers clubs where dancers met, swapped steps, and created new innovations. Tap was seen as inherently masculine, and the women who did participate often remained on the sidelines as nameless members of the chorus line. But the history of tap is not, in fact, a womanless history. With Diary of a Tap Dancer, Ayodele aims to remedy the gaps in our historical record by recognizing and celebrating the contributions to tap of women and people of color. Rather than shying away from the uncomfortable and painful aspects of the forum's legacy, Ayodele engages them head-on, deploying her singular energy and exuberance. She tells stories that need to be told, and she envisions what might have been had women been treated as equals. That is to say, Ayodele tells a story about tap dance as only she could tell it. Ayodele's interest in life as a hoofer began at New York University's Tisch School of the Arts. Initially, she wanted to become an actor. Ayodele's first formal introduction to tap was a course taken to fulfill a degree requirement. She later befriended fellow Tisch student and tap prodigy Bakari Wilder, who offered lessons free of charge and introduced Ayodele to the community. She developed an infectious passion for the craft, which has led her to perform in every imaginable sort of venue, from subway stations to the White House. She is the first and only female member of Savion Glover's elite troupe, Not Your Ordinary Tappers, and she was recently named one of the New York Times Breakout Stars of 2019. Ayodele also is a committed advocate who generously shares her talent and her craft. Among other efforts, she joined forces with a number of tap luminaries to launch Operation Tap, a website that aims to make tap instruction accessible to anyone with a pair of shoes and a willingness to learn. We are so pleased to have her here to speak and perform this afternoon. Following Ayodele's talk and performance, she will be joined in conversation by Boston Globe culture writer and 2017 Nieman Fellow Janae Osterhelt. I'm pleased to welcome Janae back to Harvard to take part in today's program. Now, please join me in warmly welcoming Ayodele Kasau.
Thank you. Wow. Wow. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah. Wow. Gratitude is so important. I just want to thank you. I want to express my deepest gratitude to everyone in attendance today. Thank you, Dean Brown-Nagin, and thank you to the Radcliffe Institute for inviting me to be a part of this evening. It is a huge honor, huge honor. I want to give a shout out to my fellow fellows who are here. Yeah, I am really enjoying and I value deeply the time that I get to spend with you. I'm so inspired by the work that you share and how you think about your practice and your process has inspired me to dig deeper into my own relationship with my art, and I am thankful for the opportunity to be in your energy field. Thank you so much. This time here at Radcliffe has been such a luxury. It's the first time that I've been afforded the opportunity to work and to study with this kind of support in over 23 years as a tap dance professional. I was visiting my mom in Puerto Rico when I got a voicemail from Meredith Quinn, our executive director, asking me to call her back. When I called her back, she told me I got accepted into the program. I was crying because I just was over the moon. I'm the first generation in my family to have gone to college. And so, yeah. So to be able to share this news with my mom in that moment was really, really special. And I want to acknowledge her support. She's in Puerto Rico currently and couldn't be here, but I just know that this gathering would make her so very, very proud. I also want to acknowledge the staff here at Radcliffe who work so diligently to support us. Rebecca Haley, Rebecca Wasserman, Nora, Jessica Vickland, Sharon Bromberg-Lynn, and Jess, and Steve, and Margarita. Yes, indeed. Thank you. And I want to also acknowledge Jill Johnson over at the Harvard Dance Center and Lori Gross, who actually invited me to be a part of the Harvard community about 2 years ago when I was artist in residence. And also Diane Borger. You all have made my time here at Harvard just really, really quite awesome. I want to thank you, Janae, for being here today. As you heard, she was a Neiman Fellow. Pretty awesome. I want to say thank you to my wife, Toria, who is my greatest love and my greatest supporter and artistic collaborator. And I also want to take the time to acknowledge the presence of tap royalty in the room. Diane Walker, who's right here. And she is a tap dancer, a mentor, a friend. She's like the matriarch of our tap community, and she's known to us as Aunt Diane. And she holds so much of our tap history within her, and I love you, and I love her for that. Yeah. And I want to acknowledge Barbara Duffy right here, another tap dancer, well, my friend, and your support over the years has just meant the world to me. She's also a fantastic tap educator, and she got my triplets in order very early on in my training. So I really appreciate that. I want to thank and acknowledge my tap dancing homies, Andre Imanishi and Dre Torres, who flew from New York and Texas to join me today. I'm really, really proud that they're here. And also, I think that there are other tap dancers in the room. Can you just like say whoop whoop if you're here? Yay! So I'm just really, really proud to have you here. Thank you so much. The work I've been undertaking while a fellow here is really an extension of my lived experience as a Black and Puerto Rican woman growing up in the Bronx and in Puerto Rico. It points to my obsession with language and communication and the expression of my identity and my culture, which I think is something I will be exploring and undertaking for the rest of my life. My time here has afforded me the opportunity for a deeper dive into the art form that I have been in love with, yes, in love with, and deeply curious about since I first saw it and heard it for the first time as a teenager. And I humbly acknowledge that I have a lot of homework left to do and a lot of studying, but it actually really excites me. I believe that I am continuing in the work that scholars and writers have begun, and I just want to acknowledge them really briefly. I want to acknowledge Cheryl Willis, and I want to acknowledge Itabari and Jerry, and Constance Vallis Hill, and Nadine George Graves, and Jermaine Ingram, and I want to acknowledge Deborah Kodish and Sally Summer, and all of these women who have intentionally worked toward moving that needle in the direction of balance. They have worked to shine a light on the many, many forgotten voices of women hoofers, and particularly black women hoofers of the 1920s through 1950s. I also acknowledge that I'm standing on the shoulders of Bell Hooks and Audre Lorde and Toni Morrison and Alice Walker and pretty much every woman who has been committed to unearthing our histories and the experience of black people. I, Ayodele, am here today because of my intense need, desire, calling, responsibility to speak the names of Jenny Lagan, Lois Bright, Louise Madison, Juanita Pitts, Alice Whitman, Cora Lared, Edwina Salt Evelyn, Jewel Pepper Welch, and the many, many other black women tap dancers from the 1920s and 50s whose stories have been lost to history. I want to tell you that they are soloists, chorus girls, producers, choreographers, entrepreneurs. They were women who donned everything from suits and ties and skirts and shorts and Oxford taps, and they refused to compromise their skill set based on their dress, based on racism or sexism or even any gender role expectations. And I'm especially thrilled that we get to share this time talking about tap dancing, an art form that is deeply rooted in the expression of black people and in this country during this Black History Month. I'm really excited about that. As I started to learn about these women, I was in awe of the parallel within our stories, because everything from how much they loved tap dancing to who taught them to hanging around stage doors and the experience of being disregarded and overlooked simply because we were women, black women. My aha moment, which is actually filled with a lot of fear, came when I read a tap history book that summed up my life and career in 2 pages, and it ended with these words. And she, referring to me, she stopped dancing for 2 years. And it hit me. The reality that if I didn't take the time to share my story, to document my narrative, to share my experience, and then my story would be no different than that of Lois and Louise and Juanita. And I was determined for myself to make sure that I changed that. And I feel like it's one of my responsibilities to urge everybody that I come into contact with to remember that our stories matter, that our lives matter, that our time here on earth is important, and that we need not wait for an invitation to tell our story. Amen. All right? Yeah. Tap is magic. I've been saying this for quite some time. I really believe that deep down, everybody wants to tap dance. And if they don't, then they're really, really intrigued by it. You know, I meet people who used to take tap, and then they stopped and they regret it. And I meet people who, do this when I say I'm a tap dancer, and they're like, and I meet people who immediately think about Gene Kelly and Shirley Temple. And I meet people who are perplexed that tap dancing is still around. And then when I say I'm a tap dancer, they look at me like I'm a unicorn and I have 2 heads. I meet men in my hood in the Bronx and in all kinds of hoods who when they find out I'm a tap dancer, they're like, yo, you tap dance? Yeah, that's what's up. And I get it, because tap is magical. It's musical, it's a language, it moves us, and it changed my life.
Ayodele is one of the top tap dancers, male, female.
I'm from the boogie down Bronx, the birthplace of hip hop, J-Lo, and the only borough in the world to have a "the" in front of it. We walk fast and we talk fast, but don't worry, I'm not gonna do that here because I wanna make sure you understand every word that I'm saying. Word. Some quick facts. My mother's Puerto Rican, my father's black. I'm raised by my mother, and I don't meet my father until I'm 17. When I am 9 years old, my mom, in an effort to protect me from the domestic violence situation we were in, sends me to live with my grandparents in Puerto Rico. I don't speak Spanish. I know one word, hola. And they don't speak much English. It's September, and school has started. I'm completely lost in my classes, and I also feel the pressure of having to make friends, and I feel lonely and isolated. I have so many thoughts and feelings, and I'm not able to express them. My grandmother teaches me the alphabet using a letter and number stencil. A, B, C, Che, uno, dos, tres. I don't remember exactly when I become fluent, but it happens. My time in Puerto Rico is formative and in many ways. I traded the concrete jungle in New York City for the beautiful blues in the ocean green in the leaves of the Caribbean. Puerto Rico is also the place where I learn about Columbus and colonization and its lasting and damaging effects on the minds of a people. As a young person, I don't have the language to identify it as such, but I experience it when I hear people say, "Black people are lazy," or "the women in En Vogue, that singing group, they're pretty for black girls." Or when you're older, you should marry a white person so that you can lighten the race, because white was prettier, better, something to aspire to. I'm teased at school for my curly, thick hair, and the kids ask me, "Does it get wet?" "Well, it looks like you put it in the toaster." I start putting conditioner in my hair at night and praying to God that when I wake up, it's straight. It doesn't work. It never works. I see little to no Afro-Latin black representation, and it starts to eat at my self-esteem. My anger and frustration leads me to develop another skill, a fist fighter at my elementary school. Specifically with boys. I get into so many fights that my teachers start calling me Muhammad Ali, and that was a compliment. I'm supposed to stay in Puerto Rico for a year, but I end up staying for 6, and I return to New York City at the age of 15. My English is severely out of practice, and I find myself in a similar struggle of communicating. My words become jumbled. It's not as terrible as when I moved to Puerto Rico, but I work hard again to regain my vocabulary. In my senior year in high school, my English teacher must have been tired of teaching the standard shit, so she made up a course that she wanted to teach. History of the movies. When I was in Puerto Rico, my mom would send me movies with notes on it saying, "Watch this, very good movie." Shirley Temple movies. I never watched them. But in this class, I fell in love with the golden era. Cary Grant and Rita Hayworth, and Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy, Clark Gable and Vivian Leigh, and then Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. I love them. Every day after school, I would go to the library to rent their movies. I'd go home, and then I'd make a batch of pancakes, and then I would pop Swing Time or Top Hat and Follow the Fleet into the VCR for my daily dose of Hollywood glamour. I can teach myself to tap, right? I can't do what they're doing, but I want to so badly, I can dream about it. In my head, I am Ginger. I'm an acting major at NYU, and my first year they offer Tai Chi and tap. Finally, tap. I'm so freaking excited to sign up, and now the only thing I need to do is find some shoes. Now, where does one go to find shoes? Can you just, where do you go get tap shoes? Teddy's, Capezio. I went to Payless Shoe Source. Why? Because I didn't want them to be any old tap shoes. I wanted them to look exactly like Ginger Rogers shoes and Follow the Fleet. They had a tiny heel, some lace-ups, and a bow. And then the gods are shining upon me on this day because on that rack, I find suede shoes with a little tiny heel, lace-up, and I go to the shoe cobbler to get them tapped up. And let me tell you something. I walk into that first class in style. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm gonna look like I know what I'm doing. And then, you know, after the short period of time, I realized, like, I think I'm good at this. I think that because when I look over the room to my fellow actors, I realized that indeed I look more like Ginger Rogers than they do, and let's just say I just make sure I do not look like them. And right around this time, I meet my father for the very first time. We agree to meet on a street corner. And I keep wondering what he will look like. I think, does he look like me? Is he gonna look like Blair Underwood? Because like L.A. Law was one of my favorite shows. But several men walk in my direction, but they just keep moving past me. And then finally, in the distance, I see a man walking towards me. He's staring. Is that him? Is it him? And it's him. This Afrocentric, dreadlocked, African garb man is my father. His blackness is all over him, and his confidence in his skin is contagious. I start wearing oils, amber and patchouli, red, green, yellow bracelets representing Africa, African print sarongs, cornrows, cowrie shells tied to the ends of my cornrows. I tried it all because all of those years that I missed, they seem to have poured into me, making me whole. Then I begin to realize that there's nothing for me at school. There's nothing for people like me at school. You know, every scene that I work on in acting class has characters that look nothing like me. They don't even give me August Wilson plays to work on, not even Raisin in the Sun, nothing. And I'm driving my speech teacher crazy. They offered, they offered, they offered, they offered, offered. You know, I can't. So I can't wait to go back to tap class because in there, you know, I'm killing the game in there. And I'm so good that my classmate Gene introduces me to a freshman at the time. His name is Bakari. And he says, yeah, you tap dance and you tap dance. You should tap dance together. And I was like, yeah, we should, because I'm doing it. You know, I'm tapping, I'm flapping, I'm toe knocking, I'm jamming. I'm the best in my class. Let's go. So we go to Faisal's, which is this studio on 47th Street. And I'm putting on my suede Payless tap shoes. And then I hear this. Like not for lap ball change at all whatsoever. Nothing. And then my illustrious tap jam, it just turned into a private lesson. And but I learned, and this is what Bakari teaches me so generously, that tap isn't a series of steps, that it's not a flap or a cramp roll or a maxi Ford, but that's its expression, and that it comes from yourself, right? And that specifically that tap dancing was born in this country. And I learned that when African people came here as slaves and they carried with them their tradition and their culture and their customs and their spirituality and their rhythm and their power, that they were so powerful that they could rise in rebellion across plantations just through rhythm. And that when that is discovered, laws are enacted in this country to take their drums away and to strip them of any freedoms that they have left. So, consider what happens to a human being when you're and that violent act of silencing. I learn about William Henry Lane, a young African-American man in New York City with exceptional juba skill. He meets John Diamond, an Irish minstrel dancer, and beats him in a challenge. They name him Master Juba, and he becomes the father of tap dance. And then I learned about Bill Bojangles Robinson, and John Bubbles, and the Nicholas brothers, and the Berry brothers, and Gregory Hines, and Honey Coles, and Charlie Atkins, and Bunny Briggs, and Henry Latang, and Sammy Davis
Tap
Jr.
dancing is a male-dominated art form. It's very hard for women to get through.
It's a man's world, but I don't care. I just want to dance. I just want to dance, and I fall in love. I don't know. Like all of a sudden, Fred and Ginger, they seem elementary to me. It seems basic, superficial, just comparatively. I feel something else. I want to know how to do that, what he was doing. And I become obsessed. And this is different than anything else I've ever done before, but it feels familiar. You know, it's like it wants to make sure that my attention doesn't wander onto something else. And then I want to be with it all the time. A real love. Like everything else seems so insignificant. And I'm ready. I know that there are no shortcuts. I paddle and roll. For 4 hours, back and forth in my living room. It's a man's world, but I just want to dance. You know, I want to engage in conversation at that level. It's real. Like I can be myself. I don't have to alter myself to fit into anyone's script. You know, nobody sees me as Juliet or Blanche or Laura. I'm so tired of feeling inadequate, of altering my speech so that I don't sound like exactly where I'm from. The Bronx, I'm from the Bronx. And I love her, but please stop comparing me to Rosie Perez. And anyway, right, there can only be room for one of us, right? How many of us do you think they're going to let through? Yeah. I don't know about there in Hollywood, but here, there's space for me here, in these shoes, looking and sounding exactly how I am now. Ba, te goom goom da te goom goom te ba te te ba te tu set te tu ba te tu ba te 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 ba te tu ba te te bu ba te go go te ra ba da pi ka te te ba te ba te te bu ba te du ba da te u ba te tu ba te te bi ba u te ba te ba te ba te ru ri ku te ru ri ku te ru ri ku te ru ri bu ba te u te ru ba te u te te bu ah te te go ba u te ru ba ba te 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 bu bu bum te bum bum boom. And these steps are my words, my English and my Spanish words that used to get jammed right at the exit point of my mouth. They seem to have found a way to flow out through my feet. It's genius. Tap, it's like magic. And you have 2 pieces of metal on each foot and an infinite amount of music. A groove, a flow, no hesitation. I know that there are no shortcuts. I practice all the time on that wood, in the grocery store, in the alleyways, the jam sessions, the poetry houses, on the subway platform, in my street shoes. And sometimes, I get so lost in my practice that when I lift my head up, crowds have gathered around me, and people are listening to me without having to say a word. And that feels good, really, really good. Bringing the noise, bringing the funk. Yeah. I had to say something about that show. I sat in the audience at the Public Theater in 1995 in complete awe. It was the first time that I had seen young black people take up space in a theatrical way with such power and such authenticity. I hung around Funk University. So Funk University was the training ground for young men of color to enter the show once it was on Broadway. And it was only men, there were no women roles in that. But I told you I didn't care. I was like, let me in. I hang around peeking through their window enough times that the director, Ted Levy, invited me to be a part of it. And so what we would do is that we would work on improvisation and we'd work on like choreography, and we'd learn how to swing, we'd work on our technique, and then during lunchtime we would watch footage of the great masters. And that was the first time that I saw Lois Bright. Yeah, Lois Bright. Let me tell you something. I watched that video so many times. Yes, please give it up for Lois Bright. Down to how she moved and like fixed her jacket, and her shoulders would go up. She was cool. Wasn't she, Aunt Diane? Was she cool? Then later when I started dancing professionally, so this is what I would hear after the shows. Girl, you could do everything that they were doing. I was like, oh. Or they say like, you dance like a man. Or I didn't even know women tap danced. And I think that they really thought that those were compliments, But I knew I started to think like, who, why would they say that? Because I knew that I knew enough to know that I wasn't the only woman there. I mean, I met Roxanne Butterfly. I saw her improvising for the first time in this club at Deanna's in New York City. And I knew about Dormisha, who was about to enter, one of my peers who was about to enter the Broadway cast. And of course, I knew about Diane Walker and Barbara Duffy and Brenda Buffalino. And I knew of these women. And I had remember seeing this clip of Lois Bright, but I'm like, why do people think that? Oh, where were the women who looked like me? Not Ginger Rogers, not Eleanor Powell, not Ruby Keeler. Where were the women in that time that looked like me? And I started to realize that though I had entered this world, I was completely unaware as to the gender politics of the art form. For example, like Dean Brown said, that women weren't allowed into the Hoofers Club, which is where the men went to network and trade steps and just hang around one another. And the popular belief was that a woman's role was in the home, tending to her husband's needs. And then if she was working, she was not a soloist, but she was expected to be a member of the chorus line. And so my curiosity called me to find out who was out there. And I remembered this article from the Village Voice that was called The Hidden History of Black Women Tap Dancers in the 1950s. And I called the Village Voice, and I got the author's name. Her name was Itabari Njeri. And I call her, and she lets me know that one of the women that she wrote about in the article was still alive. Her name was Jenny Lagan. Jenny Lagan, the first African-American woman to be signed to an MGM contract to any major Hollywood studio. She was the only woman to be paired with Bill Robinson on screen, other than Shirley Temple, who was a child and white. And so I got her number. She said, oh, she would love to hear from you. So I called her and I said, hi, Jenny, my name is Ayodele Cassell. I'm a tap dancer from New York, and I just found out about you, and I want to know so much more about you. Where are you? I'll fly anywhere. And the first thing she said was, oh my, I thought they'd forgotten me. I called Temple University to order a dissertation written by Cheryl Willis, and when it comes in the mail, I am stunned. It's this thick. There were so many of them, that I had never knew about. Nobody was talking about them. Louise Madison, Candy and Pepper, the Edwards sisters, Ludi Jones, Juanita Pitts. And I regretfully acknowledge that I may never uncover any additional details about how these women lived, how they felt about their experience as tap dancers, and I may only have a 30-second clip of Juanita Pitts, a faded photograph of Louise Madison, 4 glorious minutes of Lois Bright, a 2-minute clip of Cora Lared. And it makes me angry, but most of all, I'm sad because I feel like I have been robbed, and we have been robbed of experiencing their genius and their joy, and to have seen the evolution of their artistry. How do we maintain the legacy of an art form if its social and historical contexts are not inclusive?
It's not that women couldn't tap dance better. It's just that they weren't going to get the opportunity to overdance the man. They didn't want to give them a chance to show a man up, you know? She was an outstanding tap dancer, and she's just never been recognized for it. Everyone knew she could tap circles around her partner, but she had to make herself seem small so that he could get work. I don't know. There were always great women dancers who were out there doing it just like the men. That's how I learned, by watching them, and I wasn't shy about it either. I wanted to learn those steps. And there weren't a lot of women who would go out there and try to do it like that. It took guts. Juanita Pitts? That girl could dance her ass off. Louise Madison was the best of them all, man or woman. If she were here now, she could dance circles around Gregory Hines. There were a lot of rumors of her getting involved with drugs and with the wrong crowd, but she disappeared from the scene. Such a loss. That girl wouldn't care about going up against any man. They had no choice but to respect her. She was that good. People would compare her to Baby Lawrence, and he was one of the greatest.
Makes no difference just give that rhythm everything you got. It don't mean a thing if you ain't got
We deliberately wore clothes that covered most of our body. To us, what you heard was most important. If you have something to say on that floor, there's no need to expose your body. She was an outstanding tap dancer. She's just never been recognized for it. Everyone knew she could tap circles around her partner, but she had to make herself seem small so that he could get work. I don't know. Just overlooked.
I want to share some of the things that I found of them. Alice Whitman and the Whitman sisters. Tap dancers, entrepreneurs, choreographers, producers who owned and produced their own performing company, the highest paid and the most successful act on the Toby circuit. The Edwards sisters, one of the fastest dance teams in the business, rare and consistently praised dancers in a field dominated by men, and brother teams, and appeared many times with Duke Ellington and his orchestra. Lois Bright, right-hand woman to choreographer Charlie Atkins, killer dancer whose execution of flashy and athletic steps would surely dispel any myth of lack of power. Salt and Pepper toured the country regularly for over 10 years with Earl Father Hines. When Pepper became ill, they terminated the partnership. We had a nice career, Edwina says, and I didn't want to perform without Pepper. It was a very nice career, so that was enough. Edwina found love with a woman, but because of the times, they lived closeted for 48 years. Jewel Pepper Welch, a big-hearted, energetic woman, died alone. Don't erase them. Don't erase me. They showed up. When I feared for my safety, I showed up to dance for people who wouldn't allow me to walk through the front door. The back stairs were the only entrance for us, but we showed up. I showed up. I wanted to dance. I showed up. Don't distort my image. I showed up. We weren't in competition with the men. We just felt like we could do the same thing that they could do. We used to have to ride in the back after the engine. Those are the cars for the colored people, and those are the cars you used to have to ride. And it didn't bother me because we were down there to make a living. We weren't down there to change the Constitution. We showed up. We wanted to learn those steps no matter if you thought we were too short or too tall or too black or not black enough, not feminine enough. When you called us butches and bulldaggers, we showed up for not. You should dance dainty like a lady. Don't do wings. Why don't you dance like girls? I was taught by boys. We were showstoppers, trailblazers. We're not dancing by the books, we're dancing according to how we're feeling. Don't erase me. Once upon a time, I was a star. I got dancing in my bones. I was a good tap dancer. I say that with no ego. I know I was a good dancer and a good person. Don't erase me. I never got to be on Oprah, but maybe she'll still learn who I am. I'm from the boogie down Bronx, Chicago, Massachusetts, Kansas, Georgia, Philadelphia. When I dance, I'm like Ray Barretto on the congas. I'm like Orestes Villaton timbales. I'm like Hector Lavoe when he sings his soul. I'm like Ella Fitzgerald's playful scats, Oscar Peterson on keys, and Muhammad Ali in the ring. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transferred, and I can't change the past, but I can use my voice. While I have breath in my body to speak their names, I and my ancestors' wildest dreams, all of them, they showed up. I will not be written out of history and hope that some young kid discovers decades later that I existed and that I lived and that I danced. Everyone who sees me will see them. Thank you. 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 Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Woo-wee. Yeah, all right. Janae, come on up, Janae. This, right, left, right. Thank you.
Wow.
Have some water. That went by so fast. Did I skip anything?
If we were at Teju's house having a drink, I'd just say, yes, queen. You talked a lot about tap as a language and finding the words that you didn't have before in every move and every tap and every click and clack. And there's so many times when, as Black women and people of color, period, LGBTQ people, immigrant people, marginalized people, period, feel as though they don't have a voice. How does dance help destroy the system that creates voicelessness?
I think I speak from my own experience. When I realized that this art form, which I had originally come to thinking, as I said, was something outside of me that I could never be a part of, and then when I realized that it was so connected to my ancestors, it filled me with a sense of pride. But I think most importantly, as a person, as a Black and Puerto Rican woman walking in this world now, where inclusion and diversity, people aren't really talking about that, I feel like I found my power when I'm in the shoes. I'm like in the center of my power, and when I realized that who I am, like that really my experience matters, that what I learned in Puerto Rico, what I learned here, that when I realized that who I am matters, and that this makes me powerful, I don't know, it helps me move through the world with I don't know, a lot more purpose, with a lot of purpose.
Listening to you talk about lifting all of the women who were erased and forgotten by some makes me think about where we're at right now. And we're at this moment, and it's really one long moment. You know, I feel like every decade someone says, we're at this moment. It's really like a never-ending moment. We're at this place where I feel like Black women specifically are fighting to show up as their authentic selves, like fighting for the right to show up without code switching, without trying to be a man or be someone else, just to be anything else but live our truth. And there's this thing that happens when you're an Ayanna Pressley or an Ayodele, and you're out here holding space for everyone and representing people who feel like they weren't represented before and they see themselves in you. And I know this as a culture columnist, just writing through the intersection of culture and the arts and identity and social justice. There's a emotional labor that goes into it, and as much as you love your work and the purpose is there and it's something that you are passionate about, like you said, you're in love with it. It can be emotionally exhausting. Can you talk a little bit about that part of doing this type of work?
Thank you for acknowledging the exhaustion. Just to tell a brief story, so I premiered a show at the Joyce Theater in the fall, and a lot of preparation went into it, and it was very well received, and we were always riding on a high, you know, from it. And then when it was over, the next day I was in the bedroom, I just woke up and I just started like crying. And like, I was like, I'm so tired. And it wasn't just a physical exhaustion. It wasn't just that, like from dancing and all of that, or even the lead up to the preparation, but I was just like, I was tired of like fighting all the time for 20 years of like, you know, you should listen to women. You should have, tap dancing should be on the program. We should dance on wood floors. We should, you know, be paid for our work. We should be heard. We should be seen. Don't overlook me. Like all of it, and this is like compounded. And I felt that pressure, you know? And I was like, I just want to, I don't know, become a contractor or something. But, but then I realized like, I have no choice. So there's no, I just show up. I just show up because I have to. I don't know if there's another way, but I just show up. I put on my shoes, and I get dressed in the, you know, for the day, and I show up. I engage with young people, and I just say, listen, you're beautiful, you matter, you're amazing, you know, you have power, and go forth and conquer. And I say that to them, and I say that to myself, you know, so that I can just keep doing it. But also, I feel like the long moment that you're talking about, like the needle, it seems to move slowly, but I think it moves. Like we're in a different place now, right? Even with tap dancing, you know, that is what people think, you know, it's a male-dominated art form, but I don't think that that's the case anymore like that, in that way. There's so many of us out there who are really, you know, so many women in particular, we're finally being heard. And I think that the only reason that is happening is because we're using our voice to speak, and that we are pushing past the exhaustion, and that we push past that feeling, and that we think of the bigger picture. And I remember one of our fellows, ZX, I think in his talk, was saying, he said something about like how we might not see full change in this lifetime, you know, but that we are like every single, we're just picking up the torch and moving it that much further, you know? So for me, it's like, I think about all of the things that I fight for as a tap dancer, for us to be, for representation in institutions or for everything that we would deserve as artists. And I think I'm fighting hard, but for that, so that somebody like Andre Imanishi, who was 18 years old, you know, but so that Andre doesn't have to fight for the same exact things that we fought, you know, that we fought for, you know?
Leonard Pitts said, you're right, it just moves slow. Leonard Pitts told me once when I was struggling as a columnist, he said, the train doesn't stop, we just get new conductors, but we keep going forward,
Yeah.
and we just keep holding seats for everybody.
Yeah, it's so important.
How do you strike the balance between, like, representation matters. And it's like, you're a black woman, you're a Puerto Rican woman, you're Afro-Latinx woman, you're a queer woman, you're a woman. And there's so many layers of oppression involved in that, and also magic and beauty and just gorgeousness. But you're dealing with disrupting tap historically, but also disrupting our narrative in America historically. How do those two fights overlap for you? Because the personal is always political somehow for us.
Yeah, I don't really see a difference, to be honest. Like, I think, like tap dancing, I don't know how other art forms, how people, like, their relationship with their art, but like, being a tap dancer is like, it's just like it's who I am. Like, it's just, and everything that comes with that. There's the joy, and then there's the love, and then there's the whatever frustration or anger or resistance or protest, all of those things that exist within the form exist out there in the world. So for me, I just see they do overlap. There's no like, I don't even have to dig deep to find the, you know, the parallels or the correlation. Like it's all there, you know. And I found it. I remember even like I said when I was at NYU, the fact that I wasn't, I was one of two people of color in our class, and we were getting like, you know, I was getting the Glass Menagerie and, you know, Romeo and Juliet. And it's not that I loved being a part, you know, being able to learn about those things, but I felt like it's not so much that I can't do that, but who's gonna see me like that? You know, will they see me like that? Now it's different. I'm sure maybe some, you know, I'm sure there've been a lot of ethnic productions of those things, but maybe. But I don't know. I just feel like it's all one and the same, and I don't really see them as separate at all. Yeah.
I've been struggling with this idea that a lot of us use of Black excellence and what that means to be excellent, to be an anomaly. And sometimes I like it and sometimes I hate it. And I think about you and I think like, oh, Gregory Hines called her one of the top young dancers and like, you are the future. And the New York Times is like, you breakout star of 2019 and you've got legends in the audience today and everyone's like, you are amazing. I've seen that. We've met and been in the same room a handful of times, and every time you're a force, even without the taps, you're just a force when you come in the room.
Thank you. Oh, thank you.
Do you feel that as a people, is it a double-edged sword to upholding this idea of Black excellence? And shouldn't we I don't want to necessarily always be an anomaly. Like, I think we are all excellent with different gifts. And how do you do that when you are upholding excellence? How do you also say, hey, this person's awesome too, which I've seen you do this. So, but how can we encourage that type of, instead of, I'm here, this is the only chair. It's like, bro, here's more chairs. Here's more chairs. Sit on the stage, come on. Like,
Yeah. Oh.
how do we cultivate that?
This might be an oversimplification of a response, but I don't know. I just feel like, isn't life so much better when you lead with generosity and gratitude, you know? So you know, I'm gonna say something. A story, Jimmy Slide. I'm bringing him into the space today, tap dancer Jimmy Slide. I remember when I first started tap dancing, it was 95, so 97, we were at the Carnegie Hall, we were honoring the Nicholas brothers. And Savion and Bakari and Dule, we were in Dule Hill, we were in the, the wings. And I had only been tap dancing for 2 years when by the time this particular event happened. And so I felt the, not pressure, but I just kind of wanted to maintain the level. I didn't want to bring anything down, So I had a little bit of always sort of practicing kind of thing. And we were in the wings and Jimmy Slide said to me, he said, "Don't compete." And I was like, yeah. And I didn't get it then. I was really, young, but I realized what he was, years later I would see him and every time I'd be like, I get it, I understand now. Because what I realized, what he was saying is just worry about, just worry about your artistry, worry about your own, journey, then everything else is gonna fall into place. And so I have always, because of that time, and because also I was taught with generosity, Bakari Wilder, he taught me, he didn't have to give me all of that, and he worked with me. Gregory Hines was incredibly generous, and I want to bring him into the space today as well. He was incredibly generous, and those are my roots. My roots are generosity, my roots are humility, my family. My great-grandfather used to cut sugar cane in Puerto Rico, for a living. My grandmother sewed handkerchiefs for 12 handkerchiefs for a quarter. My people they're humble, they're gracious, they lead like that. And so I feel like maybe I'm lucky in that I lead with this always, and I just feel until we all win, right? I win, we all win. It's like Lizzo. If I'm shining, everybody's gonna shine. I don't know, I feel like it's so much easier. It takes up so much pressure. It takes off all the pressure.
Yeah, I love that shirt. Steve Locke, this great artist Steve Locke says, brown and black people are lucky because whenever we say I, we always mean we. It's always we understood. And I love that about us.
And I just want to say something else in relation to this because I feel like the we is so important. And I want to make sure, I feel like I'm called to say this right now, is what I'm seeking is balance. For so long, our histories and our stories have been neglected, right? And I feel my responsibility to sort of uplift those stories, not so that we can then throw everything out of whack and not acknowledge the room that we're in today, the diversity, the differences of all of us, which I think are beautiful, right? What I'm seeking is so that people can look at me and they can look at Michelle Dorrance, who's another, a tap dancer, who's white, that they can look at both of us and say, no, you both deserve to be here, right?
And not only you both deserve to be here, that you being here isn't just great for people who look like you. It's great for everybody.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
One of the things I love about getting in rooms like this, especially at Harvard, because I'm here a lot, you can't get rid of me for some reason, is that when we come in these rooms and we learn from these beautiful, brilliant minds, we talk about all of the awesome things. But I think that it's important to also, it's like a highlight reel, but it's also important to talk about our personal failures and how we overcame them. So can you tell me about a time in dance where you failed and how you got over the hump?
Oh, Darren. This question is my good friend Darren right there. And all we do is talk about failure. Okay. I have to say, I don't really dwell on my failures, so they're not but I will say this. I can think of a time of a hump. When you say hump, those words stick out to me. Hump, struggle, challenge, moving forward. On a very just technical level, I remember when that transition from my tap class to real tap dancing, what I consider real tap dancing, right? I remember and learning about improvisation, and improvisation is filled with so much possibility and beauty, and when you don't know, a lot of fear and a lot of hesitation. And so I remember the first time that, I remember when I saw Roxanne, and I saw these people just making stuff up. I was like, they're making that up off the top of their heads. He said, yeah. He said, how do you do that? You just do it. You just go. And my first thing was like this. I was like, just go. And I was like, It was like nothing, right? And then he was like, just keep on. And so then it's just like, you know? And then you want it so badly, you know, because you know what's on the other side of that struggle and that challenge. And so I just stayed with it. And so it just became like, okay, I'm just gonna go for it. I don't even know, you know? Right? So you just go, you know what I mean? But it took a long, long time. But I remember just like feeling really, really discouraged and then going like, I'm just gonna stick in there and then forget swing. When we had to learn how to swing, oh my God, that's really hard. Isn't it, Barbara? It's hard, you know, it's hard to swing. No, and it's hard and like, but as I said, I also like look to that footage, that I would look at all of those great, great people because I knew they left us a roadmap. I knew that if Steve Condos could do that, and that's humanly possible, then I can do it. That if Gregory Hines can do that, then I can do that. If Jimmy Sly can do it, then I can do it because it has been done. I see it, and so if they can do it, I can do it, and I'm in it.
Thank you. Now, I never want people to dwell on their failures, but I like people who are celebrated to share their failures because sometimes people in the audience will be so happy to be like, oh, well, this person is just naturally excellent, and then they discount their own.
Yeah, no, that is not true. I said there are no shortcuts. I teach all the time, and I tell these kids, I'm like, there is no magic pill that's going to get you from, you know, this beginner class to like being a professional. It just doesn't exist. You have to put in the work. You put in the work, and then and it happens.
You're doing this amazing job at lifting the ancestors and lifting all the dancers who came before you. And this declaration of not being erased and not being invisible to the masses. But how do you want to be remembered?
I want to be remembered as a tap dancer who brought joy, challenged people to think about how the art form speaks to social justice, and as somebody who, through a lot of trials and tribulations and maybe really difficult beginnings, conquered and then created a space for everybody to take up all of their space as much as possible in the same way, with the same freedom, with the same joy, with the same love, with the same authenticity, with the same power that I have been seeking and will continue to seek for the rest of my life.
You're living that.
Yeah, thank you.
I could ask you 15 more questions and at least 3 about hip hop, but I know these beautiful people in the audience have questions, so we're going to open it up for questions.
Hi, my name is Kofi,
Hi,
and
Kofi.
I just want to say thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm honored to be in your presence. My question has to do, asking more about Hollywood, really.
Hollywood?
Yeah. So my background, I'm from Ghana, and it's funny you talk about your aha moment. I have one, which is, first of all, I want to mention how at an early stage I realized how important media, art is very important, you know, how important it is in changing the minds of people. You think about it, it's what really touches us, right? It's what moves us. So if you think of back in the day in the movements with the 60s and 70s, you know, reggae, music, all those things were huge. So you think about how, you know, it was about attacking the artist and getting rid of the art form that sort of moves things over. My aha moment came when I was, as a young student in high school. I'm watching this movie called The Dogs of War. It's an old movie, if you guys want to check it out. But it's right in the middle of this movie, and the movie's about a CIA basically going into Africa and you know, getting someplace in Africa getting overthrowing the government. And I'm sitting in the movie theater, and a bunch of all of us are like cheering on the CIA, going like, yeah, do this. That was my moment. I was like, wait a minute, I'm here cheering on this thing to come fight against me. So I realized how important media was. So my question is about Hollywood, where you talk about all the stories being, our stories being erased. What is it? For me, I see it as whether it's a funding issue, whether it's the will to actually tell those stories. But we know those stories are getting erased. What is it in Hollywood? What do you see holding people back from maybe funding some of these stories and telling? Because we know it does make money. I mean, Black Panther came out. It's not even a real thing, and it made a lot of money. So, yeah, just my questions, if you know.
What holds people back from supporting those things, from supporting our stories?
Right.
Lack of imagination. Yeah. Complete lack of imagination, and probably, you know, they don't want to take risks, and they were probably considering their core audiences, and they think that that maybe it's not valid or valuable. But I mean, I don't know. I wish I could.
Stereotypes and deep insecurity.
Ooh, yeah, well, that too, right? I can see that as well. I mean, I don't know. I found that, like, you know, one of the reasons that I started Diary of a Tap Dancer was because I felt like I wanted audiences to experience our artistry and our artistry in a different way. I felt that people would come see us dance, and they would go, oh, they're so good, they're so, like, it's the virtuosity. They would speak about that, but I felt like there was a disconnect in the experience, you know? And so what I wanted to do was I started to create work where you had to hear and understand, like, our humanity, and, like, hopefully that you would find yourself really relating to us as human beings, and then the dance would be a bonus, right? And so I think, I don't know, I feel like our goal and my goal and our job should just be to, like, continue to tell our story, to write our stories, and then to find a way to make it happen no matter what. I'm not, a Hollywood producer will not make or break me. I do that for myself. You know what I mean? Yeah. Kamara!
Hey, I don't done it. Oh my gosh. So, you talk about knowing your power. So few of us in this country, especially people of color and women of color, have found the space to know our power. So you're trying to give that to your students and saying, go out and be great. But then so much in this country is saying, I don't value you, I don't see you, I'm erasing you, I don't even know your history and don't care about it. And so in my own experience, I actually had to go outside of the US to another country, lived there for 8 months, where I was outside of the racial categorization system. There was racism there, but I wasn't part of their system. And that was the first time that I was already a Harvard professor and all that, you know, with kids and stuff. That was the first time that I knew my power. And now, since I know my power, they can't take that from me. Now that you know your power, they can't take that from you. But so many of us, even though we say, go forth, I'm making space for you, and then make your own space. What do you think about that? Like, what do we really need to do? Maybe it's not short of leaving this country. Maybe we need to go out and then come back. But how do people get to know their power in this context?
Yeah, practice. I think about this. I think about I work with young women from an organization called The Broader Way, and they are middle school girls, so they're ages like 9, 10 through like 16. And one of the things, and I'm the director of grad programs there, and one of the things that we do in the summer is our personal mission statements. Because what I realized as a tap dancer and doing this work is that I had to write it out. I had to name it. I had to express it verbally, not just with dance. You know, it wasn't enough for me to just show up and dance. I wanted to be able to say it and use my words and use really everything that's available to me, all of my creativity, all of my everything. And so what I do with them is we work on these personal mission statements, and it's called The 3 prompts are I am, I believe, and I fight for, right? And so what I did this last summer as an example of like how do we do this is I worked with them. They came up with the answer to that. And then part 2 of this was how do you practice that? Like in the real world, because it's one thing to write it in your journal, right? Where you're like at night or like saying your mantras, and that's important as well, right? But it is another thing to stand in front of a group of strangers and say that. So what we did was, and for that show that Toria, my wife, was the creative director on, we had them say those personal mission statements every single night. We had six or 7 shows sold out, and I had them take center stage in front of 500 people every night and say, I am Jasmine Mendoza, I believe that the earth, and that I fight for this. And the fact that they were able to say this out loud through shaking initially, the first time they did it, they were like this, I am, they didn't want to hear their voices, and by the end, they were like, my name is Jasmine Yvette Mendoza, I am and I think that filled them, it does it, and I think the practice of saying, and I think that just because, it's not that there's an absence of fear. I mean, I was like having 700 panic attacks before I came into this room today. But it's just that you push through regardless of the fear, that, that you exercise your courage over your fear. Just to practice. That's right. I don't know if that.
No.
Yeah, something like that.
We're going to take our last question, but before we take our last question, young sister, what was your question? I'm going to ask it after this one. Yeah, I saw you.
Hi, I'm Kayla. I just wanted to ask, around in the dance world, a lot of people that are dancing with women, or like their body, do like a lot of not like really like the dance form, but mostly about like the image and like just trying to like over sexualize. I was wondering if you experience that and how you.
Body image and hypersexuality? Yeah. All right, we're going to get to that one. You ask yours, and then that's it.
Okay.
Thank you. Hi, I met you at Chica Projects fundraiser, so I am so happy to be here and thank you for everything. And it's just been a wonderful journey to follow you and keep inspiring. My question is, what comes next? What is next for you?
Hey.
Diary of a Tap Dancer.
Diary of a Tap Dancer.
The full show.
Yeah, I think what comes next is, I'm obviously working on this piece here, but I feel a calling to not necessarily take a back seat, but I want to produce work and for young people. I feel like, I just to talk about Gregory Hines again. He was such an incredible supporter, and I just remember like that investment that he made, and I think his influence on me is more about who he was as a person, and the fact that he used his celebrity and that he used his that spotlight to shine it back on other people and to shine it on our community. And so I feel like for me, yes, I want to continue to write and produce, and also I would love to get like these stories to like larger audiences, not just theater audiences, but maybe Hollywood, Netflix, all those people, just because I think that these stories are really, really important, so I think that's what's next for me.
When this streams, hello, Ava, make it happen.
Hey, Ava, yeah, and just regarding like body image and how do you, I've been so lucky going in that I feel like it's been very important for me to take the stage or take up space being as authentic as possible, and I have never really felt the need to like wear a bra and tap dance, and it just hasn't been my, I haven't felt that pressure. And I think that, but I did see that happening. But what I did do, I said, instead of like being concerned that our dance is being over-sexualized or to, if people want to call it that, I was like, let me just show them this way, And so for me, I dance in blazers and up to here and pants and Oxford shoes and just like my ladies. I think you just have to be yourself. Be yourself at all times. There's space for every single one of us. Yeah.
Thank you, Ayo.
Yeah. Thank you, Gina. Thank you.
That was a wonderful thought to end with. Thank you so much to Ayodele and to Janae. That was just beautiful.
Thank you, Bree Brown. Thank you, Bree Brown. Thank